Hi there, I'm Matt Hefner and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing episode 4 of my XCI tutorial series about how you can learn to create your own adventure game using the engine that I created for the Commander X16 retrocomputer. So this episode is going to be on the help files. It's going to be pretty short and to the point. There's not a lot to go over for this, but it is something unique within the engine that you can do. So like most applications, you're going to have the ability and generally the desire to have some sort of user help. And what we have for XCI is the possibility of having up to 2 different help screens that can come up from the menu. And one is the controls help, and the other is the about, which you'd normally see in any type of game. Like here I am using LibreOffice Impress. There's an about, and it gives me all this wonderful license and build number and copyright information and all that good stuff. So you can have something similar, obviously much less involved because we're dealing with a pretty low res situation here. So to kind of show you what this actually looks like within the game, if you've seen the example game in some of my previous videos, then you might recognize this screen right here, or if in fact you've played it, and you'd see this come up when you select controls from the help menu. And you've got here just saying, oh, here's what these different menus are. We've got the file menu, the sound menu, and then we can have the toolbar. We mouse down to the bottom to show it, and it shows all these different buttons and what they do. And we can see here it corresponds to the actual source. Now, what you will notice is that unlike the XCI configuration files, if you go back and watch episode 2 from this series, it goes over the syntax for that file. Most of the game is built using that particular language I created. This one is more of a markup language that I created specifically for these help files, because in most cases they're going to be very text heavy. They're not going to be just a basic tile map, because that would get a little difficult. You just want to be able to kind of write some words in there. And that's what this allows you to do, so that most of the actual file for the source is plain text. Of course you can have comments, so the stuff that doesn't show up actually on the screen. And you can just have plain text, like here at the bottom I have a click to close help, because that's how these help files work. Basically they're up until the user clicks, and then you go back to where you were in the game. And then you can also specify specific tiles if you want to have graphical elements besides text in there, because otherwise it's just going to be plain text, which is perfectly fine. And in fact, if you look at what the baseline is for this file, you'll see here the controls.txt just says place controls help here, click to close help, and that's it. And that would give you a very basic look. And in fact, if we start the game, we'd see exactly what that would look like. And if you watched back to the first episode, you saw us create that little start screen. Anyway, here I go to help and I go to controls, and that's all I get. Plain white box. But you'll notice here that it's surrounded by black. There's no extra space there because within the source file I don't have any extra space. I don't have anything taking up additional space to make it wider. So basically the help file, when it's fully rendered, it's going to be basically the minimum width in order to fit what you've put into your little markup file. And if I had made it bigger, it'd be wider, and up to that, of course, the 40 tile wide display that you get with XCI. But if I go here down to about, we see something a little fancier. It's got nice little rounded edges on it, and it's got some actual information. I'm actually taking credit for this tutorial game, unlike the example game. But here we can see again, just click and it goes away, and I'll go ahead and get rid of this. So what's different about .text, which again, if you look back here in the menu file here, as we saw in the previous video, we went over how the menu file is built and what the different parts are, but we didn't get into the actual help files in that. And here you can see controls and about are these special keys in there that identify files, and those files are these markup files. So for controls, we have something called controls.txt. That's the default file in the template. And about is about.txt. So let's take a look at about.txt. And here we can see, oh, well, now we've got these threes and with H's and V's. And basically that's what gives us those rounded corners, is because we're using tile 3 and we're flipping it in different ways, horizontally, vertically, or both horizontally and vertically. And that gives us that effect that we want to see. Now, if you remember back in the previous video, we used tile 3 for the corners of that menu. And you can see over here, LC and RC use 3 and 3H. And that gave us those nice rounded corners at the top of the screen. And so we're making use of that same look here to not just have those squared off corners. And so let's take a look at basically what we can put into these help files and how this syntax works, because like I said, it's very different from that XCI configuration syntax. So basically you have 4 different kinds of things that can appear within these help files. The most basic thing is just plain text. It's the default for anything that you put in there. There's no pound or backslash preceding it. It's just text, letters, numbers, spaces, special characters. The whole printable standard 7-bit ASCII character set is supported by the default tiles that come with the XCI game engine. Of course, you can go ahead and define extended ASCII if you want to use up your tiles for that. Have some accented characters. Of course, you're going to be responsible for defining the look of those characters. But I'll give you the basic 127 or minus, however many there's in there, from basically the space up to the tilde at good old index 127. You get all those characters for free, and you can sort of move on from there. And so yeah, you can include any of those in the plain text, but as we'll see, since pound and backslash have special uses, if you want to actually have those, we got to do something different. But basically any sort of plain text that you put in there will use the menu text colors. And as we go back here and look at the menu file, you'll remember here we have, for menu text, we have a background color that's white and a foreground color that's black. So that's what we're going to expect to see in the same help files, just to look sort of consistent with what we see in the menus. Make sure the help files look kind of similar. And then the next kind of thing is a comment. And a comment is preceded by an unescaped hash or pound. And that unescaped means there's no backslash before the pound. And we'll see what that means later. And in our little example files, yeah, we go ahead and say, yep, here's our control file template, and we put a little hash at the beginning of that line. Now you could end a line with a comment also if you don't have that that pound sign escaped. It will not render this as part of the controls. And then the escaped tiles. So the tiles, unlike the text, use the default palette offset 0, those first 16 colors that you define for your X16 game, your XCI game rather. And all that is the tile index that with a preceding backslash before it. And then after the index, you could have H's and or V's to show how that tile may be flipped. So here we can see an example of having backslash 12HV means tile index 12. So here they got the index number and then H and V, so flip horizontally and vertically. And we've seen that in our about.txt. Here we have 3HV, so that's tile 3, which is the rounded corner. Now you notice up here in the upper right corner we just use 3 unflipped because that's the direction where that curve is. We want to get that curve rather on the upper left side, on the lower right side. We got to flip it both horizontally and vertically. And then only horizontally and only vertically for those other corners. And that way we're not defining a whole bunch of tiles. We don't need to define 4 different tiles to have curves in different directions when we have flipping at our disposal. And that can really save us a lot of memory, because it's very precious. You only get so many tiles for the whole game. And as we'll see here, we'll go into the main documentation here, because again, we'll take a look here for those tiles. We can have only 704 unique tiles, and those get used up pretty quickly, especially, like I said, considering that almost 100 of those are already used up by your ASCII character set. So if we go back up here to the table of contents, we go down to Help Files, and here we can see a nice a text explanation of how help files work, and talking about the syntax, and showing as an example this controls file, like we saw in the first slide, and what that looks like in the game. Again, with those rounded corners on both the menu and the actual help screen. And we can see here it shows up in the context of being put over. Here in blank screen, we're not actually in a level. We're sort of at the launch of the game, and we have the toolbar visible, so you can see here we're recycling the tiles that we use for those toolbar buttons in those. So if we go back and look at that first slide, we can see here all those tiles. So the user take tiles, that's those tiles 23 through 26, and just showing up in a row. And then if you remember again from that previous video, we only have one tile to define the eye, and we're just flipping it each way. So we can just further make use of all the tiles that we've already created. And that's going to be helpful for when you're creating a help file, to make sure that you're explaining what your toolbar buttons mean. So let's go back again, and so there's that controls file, the about file, sorry, and we've built it out, but now our controls file, not a lot going on there. So we need to be able to build that up. So let's go down. Oh, and before I get too much further here, another special thing, we're not going to really get into that in this video, but just know that you can, in case you wanted to have a backslash or a pound character in your plain text rendered in that good old menu text style, then you could do an escaped backslash or an escaped pound or hash, and that would just be backslash backslash to have a backslash, and backslash pound to have a pound or hash. And then if you also have this special case where you have a tile, like here, I want to render tile 34 flipped vertically, and then immediately after that tile have the word hello, which starts with an H. Well, we don't want to flip 34 vertically and horizontally and then just have ELLO after that. So we can escape that H and make sure that that gets seen. And by doing that, we would also see H in the proper menu file, text style. Oh boy, how's the quarantine working for you? I think I might be losing my mind. Anyway, let's move on here. We've already talked about what the uses are. Those basically just 2 use cases for these help files: the controls and about, and basically what you should use them for. Because when you see in that help file, and again, I'll run the game here real quick, and we'll see. You can put it in any menu that you want, but when they're going to get rendered in the menu, it'll just be as controls and about. So you don't have any ability to really change what those are. So you should make your about, and your controls something about the game controls. And yeah, so that's what we're going to do, is make our controls file a little more useful. So what we've got is not a lot. What we're going to do is make it a bit more like the about screen. So let's say here we're going to take that top screen, that top row rather, and we're going to go ahead and put that in there. But rather than say place controls help here, we're of course going to get rid of that, and we're going to type our own thing. So let me go back up to that top. So now at the second row, I'm going to move in a space. Now that space will get rendered. So that's the important thing about this, unlike say HTML, where all spaces get sort of consolidated. Spaces really count for this markup language. And it does help you control things and do it. It's not something that is meant to be modified on the fly programmatically like HTML is. We're not creating dynamic documents here. We're creating very basic static tile map documents that are rendered one time and done with a minimum of fuss. So here we're just going to have that first line of text to say, hey, we're going to, how do you actually run this thing? Well, you need to move your mouse cursor to the bottom, and that's it. Now you'll notice here it's not going all the way to the edge, and that's fine. In fact, we're going to want to make this a bit wider here in a minute, but let me write down this second part. Bottom of screen. Oop, don't do that. To reveal the toolbar. Oh, now we can see here that our text is getting a little wider than what we actually have room for. Now remember, this is going to be a single tile, these 3 characters, so we kind of have to do a little bit of math to understand that, oh, no, we need a bit more space here, and this is also going to take up one tile with these 2 characters. So we want to move that off a bit, like about out to there, so that we have a nice wide thing. Now we can see here between those corner tiles we have 31 tiles in the middle, so it's going to be 33 tiles wide. And from here we can see this is 32. So that's not quite enough, right? Because we've got here 31, 33, so we want to have a bit more room. So let's make one more space in there. So now this top row will be 32. That's in between, so plus that's 34. And so 34 means we're going to go from here all the way on 32 and then 2 more. So we're going to get a little bit of extra space. But you know, we could go in one more. I think that'll be fine, right? So let's see. Let's make a blank line in the middle. And again, you notice here my editor. I use Atom, if you haven't noticed. It's automatically indenting for me, so now I'm not starting at that edge, because having text on the edge kind of looks weird. I'm going to create a little table here. So I'm going to say I'm going to have a button, and then I'm going to have like 4 spaces. Oops. And I'll make that 5 spaces. Action. Make another empty line. And then under button, I'm going to create the first button. I want to show what the inventory button looks like. Now, again, if we go back up here and run this, our inventory button is just this INV, and then we have, and that, of course, shows the inventory. Or we've got the use button, which is that hand, and that makes our little hand cursor show up. So let's just go ahead and do those same buttons. Now, to get that INV and the white on blue, that's using that default palette. And rather than just type, say, INV, that would be in that menu text style, and we don't want that. We want it in that default text style so it looks the same. So let's go ahead and actually escape each of those characters. So 73 for I, 78 for N, 86 for V. And then we're going to need a bunch of spaces. And then we're going to, this will line up in the end. Because remember, this is only taking up all 6 or 9 of these characters are going to consolidate down to 3 tiles wide. So this will all sort of make sense in the end. And then we'll say show inventory. Roop. No, we're not Dutch. Not inventory. All right. Sorry if I'm offending the Dutch people. I know we've got quite a few out there in X16 land. and so now we want to do the use button. And we can see, as you remember down here, our use button, we're just tiles 5, 6, 7, and 8. So the top row is 5 and 6, and the second row is 7 and 8. So we can do that here. We just do 5, and then \6, and then 7, and then 8. And then we'll do the same thing where we're just going to go right up here and say use. Now, we don't have to, so we're 3 tiles a little tighter in there, and that's because we're going to be able to more easily line up, because we only have 2 tiles represented by 4 rather than 3 by 6, blah, 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 math, math, math. This isn't a math lesson. You can figure that out on your own. And a lot of this is going to be sort of trial and error, because you're going to want to just sort of play around with this and see what you want. So let's get that bottom corner, which will be 3. It's the opposite of this. So rather than just a plain tile 3, it'll be 3 flipped horizontally and vertically. And then we want to have an extra space after help and do 3V, because that would be the opposite of 3H. And we're going to need a little more space down here at the bottom so that we can move click to close help, so that we're shoving it off the corner. Because if I don't do that, it's not going to automatically just put this at the edge. What it will do is render that sort of rounded corner tile kind of in the middle, and then still fill it out with just square white spaces. We don't want that. We want to actually have everything nice and lined up and looking pretty. So now we go into the terminal, and let's rebuild. Of course, that SDK, we're just passing main.xci. It's going to reach into menu XCI, which is going to reach into both of these markup files, and just that quickly it all comes together. And now we run again. And now, if we go to controls, hey, look at that. Oh, remember what I told you about the curved stuff showing up in the middle? I did not make that top row quite wide enough. Rather than, I meant to make it 1 wider, and said I made it 1 shorter, and now it's 2 too short. You can see these 2 columns right here. Let me get this mouse cursor lined up. So yeah, so here's those 2 columns too short. And we can see, oh, our use is off there. So we're going to need to get rid of a space before use and add a couple spaces here at the top so that this gets pushed out to the edge. Or rather, you know what we'll do is it looks like we just have like too many spaces padding out. If I just bring this bottom in a couple spaces, that should do the trick. And then we'll bring use in 1. Yeah, let's just do that. So you'll notice here we've got like about 2 tiles of margin there, 3 tiles of margin. That should free us up. So we should, once we've tightened this in by 2 tiles, we should get an extra tile on each side of it. So let's do that. Let's keep this open while we go ahead and modify that. So remember, we're bringing this in by 2 and this in by 1. Let's save that, and we'll double check again. That's what we want to do. We want use to go in by 1. We want this to go in by 2 so that this edge gets lined up with this one. And here we'll see we'll have a nice 1 tile margin after the word toolbar. Our buttons are nice and lined up, and everything else looks good. So we'll go ahead and close that. We've already saved controls.txt. We'll build one more time, and then we'll run. And let's take another look. And there it is. So now it's looking much nicer. Everything's all lined up. And we've given our user plenty to see, what am I supposed to do? Yep. Oh, and there's, yep, the copyright notice is still there, although I didn't put a copyright date. This is all pretty much public domain at this point anyways. Who cares? So that's how we create these help files. So I hope you found this sort of informational and maybe inspirational. I know a lot of us have a lot more free time than we anticipated this spring, and I certainly welcome you to hop on board and start trying to develop your own game. Go through this documentation here. I've written up a ton of documentation for you, not just watching these videos, but you can go back to GitHub. The link to the GitHub repo will be in the description, and then you can just surf around through that main README, and that links you up to all this stuff, gets you not just to what you see in this file and the XCI configuration file syntax, the walkthrough of the example game, but even here I've got a brief guide of the tutorial series. Here you can see my previous episodes are all, I got the YouTube links in there. I've got links to the slides so you can download all those. Of course, you go ahead and clone the repo, you're going to get all that stuff. And once I'm done with this episode, you can see coming soon, it's happening right now. The caller is inside the house. Watch out, it's coming out on YouTube basically as soon as I can finish rendering this and get everything put up there, and I'll be modifying the online tutorial, this text tutorial with all the links and these slides and everything else. And please, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, like this video, comment, engage with us. I just hit 100 subscribers. It's very exciting. I hope to keep this moving and bring more people into the fold, and use this really trying time in world history to maybe create something awesome and something that can last, and you can look back on this time as not a time where you were just sort of cooped up and isolated and feeling down. Instead, you came up with something great that you were able to share with the world. And that's my wish to you right now. So please stay safe, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.